Thank you. Good morning. Boker Tov. Thank you, Peter. It is a pleasure to be here, and as Peter mentioned, we're very sorry that the Consul General, David Siegel, could not be here today. We're trying to overcome the major gap that we had during the strike, and I will be glad to answer any questions you have about that later. What I wanted to do today is talk for about 10 to 15 minutes, a little bit about what's going on in Israel, but mostly about what we do at the consulate, our biggest challenges, our projects, and input that we'd like from you. And afterwards, I'd like to open it up for questions, because what we mostly like when we go out is to hear from the communities and from you, because you are our target audience. I say that we're going to talk only for a few minutes about what's going on in Israel and in the world, because basically you don't need us in order to do that. In all of the media and the different outlets, you can hear about the crisis in the negotiations, what's going on with Turkey, Iran. So you don't really need the consulate in order to be updated. We'll still like to touch a little bit about how we see things, and then we're going to talk about everything else that the media is not talking about, unfortunately. As everybody knows, right now there is a major challenge within the peace talks, the negotiations, or it's even prior to the peace talks, because right now we're talking about the negotiations in order to return to negotiations. And what we see as a pattern is the entrance of the Palestinian, unfortunately, is to maintain this status. If it's through unilateral movements like reaching out to the UN and getting recognitions on 15 different international agreements and organizations, if it's not recognizing the Jewish state, if it's the right of return. So we see a certain pattern that's holding back even the return to the negotiations, which is the major challenge. And what the whole world is understanding, and so does Israel, is that this is a critical point. And this is why we call on the Palestinians to come back for the negotiations. And there are certain answers or certain points that they're making to not return to negotiations. For us, again, we're not making any prior demands. We just want to go back to the talks. And this is the bottom line. And we understand time is very crucial. Time is very crucial because we want to live in peace. And this is our main key, and this is our main objective. Hopefully, within the next couple of weeks, we're going to have some progress. And this is why we need the United States and we need the rest of the world to understand and to join us in calling the Palestinians to return to the negotiations table. This is the key point that we're talking about, but sometimes people forget that there are a lot of things in the background. For example, rockets being fired from Gaza to Israel. In these past 4 months, there have been more rockets fired in Israel than in 2013. So this is a major understanding that this is a challenge for the negotiations that we're trying to overcome, but it's unfortunately something that the media and the world media is not really talking about. The challenges that Israel is facing every day. What do we do with those terror organizations that are supported by the Hamas, and Hamas is supported by the Hezbollah in Iran? And how do we live and try to still aspire for peace within those challenges? I understand that most of the day you will be talking about those geopolitical challenges in the Middle East, in Israel. I assume you'll be talking about Iran and Turkey. And I was very interested in even seeing in the pamphlets and seeing the maps that were handed out. It's very, very political. Everything you're going to talk about today is very, very political. For me, as an Israeli, the conflict, political issues are a major part of our lives. But when you go out into the world, you understand that people don't really know anything else beyond that. Israel is being perceived through the military or political lens or the religious lens. When I talk about my everyday life in Israel, people are not really sure what does it mean. When I travel the world and I say I'm an Israeli, and people say, oh, you're the first Israeli I've seen. You don't look like an Israeli. To which I ask, oh, what does an Israeli look like? I don't know, but not like you. And this is I think, the major reason that made me join the Foreign Service. As Peter mentioned before, I studied art. I consider myself a painter, even though if you do art and nobody sees, I'm not sure it's still art. That's a different topic. But when I traveled the world, and my parents are Argentinian, so I had the opportunity to live in Buenos Aires for a few years. I worked at Disney World in Epcot Center for the Millennium Year, where we presented Israel and all of its accomplishments. I studied in Spain, and everywhere I went, I was representing Israel just by being an Israeli. And I found that happening not only with people who did not knew what Israel was, or in Spain when people told me that I was the first Jewish person they met, to which I answer, how do you know you haven't met any Jewish person until then? And again, that's a different topic, or a different talk. Every place I went, I understood that it's not just the non-Israelis and non-Jews that we're talking to. I understand that we have a big challenge with the second and third generation, with the Jewish communities, with the Israelis communities here in LA. I think LA, the Israeli community is considered, would be a major city in Israel itself. And we have a big challenge on how to make them involved and to feel more close to Israel. This is what we try to do at the consulate. My parents, when they arrived to Israel from Argentina, it was very obvious to them that they're making a big sacrifice and leaving their family behind, but being part of building the state and being part of this dream. Unfortunately, a lot of times nowadays, I don't know if we're already taken for granted a country that's only been around for less than 66 years, but we are sometimes not understanding the challenges. And every day we are facing with a new kind of anti-Semitism in our work at the consulate. If it's BDS movements, if it's different projects to delegitimize Israel and the right of existence of Israel. So what we try to do at the consulate, if I'll try to put it in a simple phrase, is trying to understand who we're talking to, who is our target audience, and understanding what they're interested in. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the past years has realized that we need to shift from a position of what we used to call hasbara, which I'm sure many of people know. In English, it will be public affairs or advocacy. When we used to talk about what we wanted to talk about, everybody will explain if we'll just explain it right. They will understand, if we just explain it right. The case for Israel. These are the arguments and these are the facts that we tell about Israel. So everybody will just be closer to Israel if we just explain it right. And it took us a few years to understand that our problems are even deeper than that. It's not just about explaining. And it's just not only because the other side might have more money, more people, more resources. It's beyond that. It's making sure that even the people that are with us understand all of our motives, and understanding and trying to bring close people who don't understand why they should care about Israel, why they need to be interested in Israel. And unfortunately, we see it not only with people who are not associated with Israel at all, but we see it with the second and third generation of the Jewish communities and the Israeli communities. So if we can't even bring our own and make them understand why Israel is important for them, then this is what we're focusing on, understanding that we might have a problem there. What we try to do at the consulate is divided by different topics. For example, we all know about the different innovations Israel is dealing with. And Israel is coming up with new ideas every day. We're changing the world. Bigger and more important people have said that the next best thing will come out of Israel. It's already coming out of Israel. And we see companies being sold in hundreds of millions of dollars. So it is interesting that a community so involved, like all of the LA, like you, are not talking about those innovations, about the medical innovations that we have, even the way that we treat veterans coming back. This is one of the topics that for the United States is very, very important, and we see a lot of interest in it. For better or worse, Israel has a lot of experience in those topics, and we try to bridge that gap through talking about it. And it's something that when you talk to people about what they care about, you make Israel an everyday issue for them. It's not just Israel with the conflict that, to be honest, a lot of people are very, very tired of hearing. It's there, and we're not avoiding it, but there are so many other things to talk about when you talk about Israel. And when I talk about my Israel, that's what I'm trying to bring. Since I study art, I feel very close to the culture world, and with everything that LA has to offer, I try to pinpoint and I try to show people how Israeli culture is already in everything that they do and see and experience. And if it's TV shows, and a lot of Israeli formats that have been adopted to the American TV and will be adopted, if it's Israeli cinema, a lot of people are not aware of those influences, because it's not just behind the scenes through technologies and different animation technologies that were invented in Israel, but it's, of course, TV series like Homeland. I think that's the most famous. And there's another show coming up that is being shot in Israel at the moment, Dig. We're trying to encourage investments and productions of Hollywood in Israel, understanding that the more people see of Israel in movies, the more it becomes a common thing. We're trying to attract them to come to Israel because of the diverse topography, the different sceneries that we have to offer there, different faces that we have to offer. Israeli food, you mentioned foodies before, so I'm a self-proclaimed foodie. I don't cook, I just eat it. That's the best part. And the Israeli cuisine, for me, serves as a metaphor to explain a little bit about Israel. The diversity of it, the creation of something new out of so many years of tradition, and within that making something that is exciting and constantly changing. And Israeli chefs are slowly getting international recognition. In the past year we've brought many chefs here, and we've sent chefs from our region to Israel, understanding that collaboration serves as a way to magnify and to double the influence that Israel has. Wine. I know that you all are very proud of this region for its wine, but Israel has some very, very good wines. When was the last time you tried an Israeli wine? Not kosher, Israeli. I don't see any hands. No, okay. Okay. Hopefully by next time when I come, you'll see more hands. But Israel, a lot of times, jokingly, I say, because Israel is referred to as a New World wine country. When I say that it's not a New World wine country, it's a biblical world wine country. When people ask me, oh, you have wine in Israel? And I say, yes. I mean, you can read about it on the Bible. And interestingly, at that time, everybody had their own small vineyard at the house because so many commands are you need to have wine for. So everybody had their own winery in-house. But what we try to do when we say that is trying to have people understand that the wine is already here. There are many, many Israeli wineries that you can get everywhere. I'm not going to name names because we're not allowed to do any publicities. If you want them, you can come to me later. But it's already here. And sometimes we're not aware because even for us, even for people who are so interested in Israel like you don't understand that it's just a reach away. For me, every dinner I go to, I take Israeli wine. I'll talk about Israeli wine. Every event that we'll have at the consulate will have Israeli wine. Because it's a way to, with a very everyday object, bring Israel closer. Not just because of the accomplishments, and Israeli wines have won some very, very big competitions worldwide. So not just because of that, because it brings, again, the conversation closer to home. And we'll be happy to do a wine tasting event here in Santa Barbara. I think it can be very interesting. If we're doing it in France and if we're exporting Israeli wine to France, then I think we can do an Israeli wine event in Santa Barbara. Students is one of our major challenges in the work that we do in universities. I mentioned briefly the BDS before, the BDS movement. And I understand in a few weeks it might be heading this way as well, to the university here. And we're there to help and to give talking points and try to see even how you can try to work on it beforehand, before it gets to that moment of the resolution or decision making. We try to work with student groups, with chancellors. We do a lot of collaborations between universities and Israeli universities. If it's academic research, if it's interchange of students, we try to encourage people to study in Israel. Again, these are some of the best universities in the world, and people don't understand that studying there, beyond the benefits of it, it's really much cheaper than the United States. So you can have a degree from a renowned university like the Hebrew University for just a quarter of what it will cost here, while experiencing Israel, of course. We do a lot of work with social organizations, if it's with human rights movements, civil rights, women's rights, LGBT. Israel has a lot to offer, and we try to create that engagement and conversation. Even within the Jewish community, we see a lot of challenges because of the diversity that exists here, that sometimes it's not being reflected in the Jewish community in Israel. We try to have discussions about the pluralism within the Jewish community and Jewish society in Israel, and we try to bring in closer different rabbis in order to create that discussion. We know that we have a long way to go still with pluralism, but I think we're heading in the right direction with the discussions that we're hosting right now. Last month, our Prime Minister was here, and he signed an economic agreement with California. How many of you heard about it? Good, okay, slowly. It's the same people with the wine. Yes. I'll just say this too, just about that, because this is a great example of a strategic collaboration we're having with California. This is a great opportunity for us to collaborate. If California has declared a crisis on water, and Israel knows what to do and how to solve those problems, this is a beneficial partnership, not just for Israel, but for California. This is a partnership that will create more jobs in California and in Israel, and this is just another way of bringing Israel closer. So I would love to answer some questions if you have about the political issues, about the geopolitical issues, but what we're trying to talk about is seeing Israel as a whole, seeing Israel and everything that it has to offer. And if I brought any ideas to head, I'm hoping that you read about it more, you'll watch an Israeli movie next time, an Israeli TV. I can send information about any one of these topics, and I'll be happy to answer now any questions you have on those and other topics.
once.
When was it?
It was about 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay.
We were told, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this. And we ignored it all. And we had the most extraordinary trip there. We went to a gathering in Nazareth after Ramadan with Arabs and Jews and Christians, and had an amazing opportunity to meet people that we were told don't go near. And I think it's really important for what you're doing to bring forth what beauty, culture, history, all of these things that aren't, I mean, everything is political there, of course, but there is so much more. And
Matthew, is there a question lurking in there?
What's that?
Is there a question mark lurking in
Yeah.
there?
So the question is, what can we do here to help change that perception?
I agree. If we could send them all to Israel, we would have. We have about, let's say, 95% success when people go to Israel. And even people who object Israel in a way, when they go there, the understanding is something that you cannot really explain with no movie, no matter how many talks or how many meetings. Once you go there, you understand something that is just without any words. If it's the size, if it's the diversity, if it's the fact that we do live together. And a lot of people, sometimes when you hear about the conflict on the news, you don't really understand that. We all live together at the end of the day. So if we could send them all, we would. We are trying, and we're sending and helping send a lot of delegations, not just us, the Ministry of Tourism, the different federations. What we do need help with is identifying people you think will be important to send to Israel. If it's the next leader, the next leader of an organization, and other key people, opinion makers, that you think that if they'll go to Israel, they'll have a multiply effect. So we're happy to hear any suggestions, because you are right. I mean, it is a good way to do it. And I also say that I asked you how long ago you were in Israel, because I call Israel the microwave country. Things that in a normal country will take 20 years, in Israel take 2 years. So every 2 years it changes a little bit, so I also recommend going there every 2 years.
And let me just say, this is not pointed at my friend Matthew, but it's actually to the person who would ask a pointed, difficult question, which is a good question to ask. Ask it quickly. Do not speechify. And now I give you Eli.
I wonder about whether what's behind the boycott movement is it really anti-Semitism, as you just mentioned it very briefly. It seems to me that it's people see people suffering and assume that the bigger, more powerful entity, the government, is responsible for those people suffering. That it's a kind of a simple, it's like it's a too simple analysis that they don't really understand, as opposed to it really being anti-Semitism.
Well,
I'm wondering what you think.
you need to, there are certain elements within the movement. And there are people who initiated the movement, and there are people who are now repeating slogans. I agree that sometimes people who are repeating it and the different students bringing it to different campuses don't fully understand what they are talking about. And that's when sometimes you'll give them the information and create a civilized discussion with them, they will change their mind or understand, or maybe understand that this is not the way, because boycott is not the way to create a discussion and to create a positive outcome. But unfortunately, what we see behind the movement is the interest to delegitimize Israel and its actions. As simple as that. And we see it as the new form of anti-Semitism. Because it's not about other countries who are doing things against, if they are doing things against human rights, it's not about the global thing. It's specifically talking about Israel.
Over here.
Hello.
last night, going out to dinner at a bar and a restaurant. The question was posed, you know, and we're talking Joe and Jane six-pack in America sitting at a bar, and I told them what I was going to do and discuss here today. And the comment came up, well, what about the Palestinians? Don't they deserve a homeland too? And one of the best informational sessions I ever went, being not in the know, most freshman members of Congress in the Senate, you know, and that's why you sponsor these trips over to Israel, had no idea of what's going on. But that constant question is, to Joe Sixpack sitting in, you know, Summerland, you know, darn, okay, what is and isn't, you know, Palestinian homeland? And of course, trying to explain that at a bar at 7 o'clock at night is rather difficult. But that to me seems like minutes, because there's a big misconception, and obviously that would be a topic for a whole other seminar. But
Well, for me, that's part of life, explaining those, trying to answer those questions at all hours of the day or night, wherever I go. If it's a ski resort, on the beach, everywhere. And yes, we are trying to promote the establishment of a Palestinian state. We do not recognize a Palestinian state yet because it doesn't have the minimum criteria in order to call it a Palestinian state. Let's begin with borders. So we are working for it, and this is the official position of the government, and this is what our Prime Minister is working for. But in order to create that, you need to go back to negotiations. And this is what we're trying to do. Because we cannot have it when they announce different unilateral actions. And I see a lot of times you are correct that this is the question that everybody's asking. But what we identify with, when I keep on talking about the second and third generation, what we identify with the students, the Israeli students, Jewish students, people who support Israel but don't know how to support it on campus and on the difficult questions. And we say that, I mean, of course, we'll be happy to help them with any answers and with any information that they need. But also they need to understand that, as I say, we need to sometimes zoom out and look at Israel as a whole. And we have a lot of challenges which are not the negotiations and the conflict. We have a lot of challenges within Israel. If it's the economy and how do you integrate more sections in the workplace. So there is a lot of things to talk about Israel. And it's a little bit like the chicken and the egg. Because of the media is talking about that, we'll focus about that. When sometimes we forget that we have many other things to offer and not just those answers. So what we try to say to people when they ask us about that, it's also, if you don't feel comfortable talking about that, if you don't know all of the answers, there are many other things you can talk about within Israel.
I think we should probably wrap it up.
Okay.
So we can do justice to the next one. Would you please join me in thanking